Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Odometry 2014 webinar series, a playbook for winning the marketing performance measurement game. Today's session is installment number 5 in the series, entitled 10 Tactics for Building an Effective Attribution Management Program. Hopefully everyone's got their office pools submitted and are ready to enjoy the March Madness. I just wanted to let everybody know I did submit the winning pool to Yahoo Sports for the $1 billion, so this may be my last webinar, but we'll see how that goes. Let's go ahead and get started. A little bit about me. My name is Casey Carey. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Odometry. Been here about a year, and I've spent the last 20 years of my career in a passionate pursuit of helping marketers do better marketing through technology, data, and services. I'm super excited today to have Tim Wilson, partner at Web Analytics Demystified, join us. Probably most of you already know Tim, super smart guy, and he's got some really interesting stuff to share with you today. Feel free to tweet us. Casey Carey is my handle, and TG Wilson is Tim's. And I'll let Tim talk more about himself when we get a little further into the presentation. First, a word from our sponsor, so at Odometry. Our mission is to power more intelligent marketing, and we do that by providing advanced marketing attribution and optimization solutions. Our customers span about 75 brands from various verticals, including auto, telecom, technology, travel, leisure, financial services, insurance, and retail. We deliver on a SaaS platform, advanced attribution solution, that integrates optimization capabilities along with marketing mix modeling. And a little bit more on the promo side, I'd love to have you all join us at the Cross-Channel Marketing Optimization Summit being held in Austin, April 30th through May 2nd at the Four Seasons in downtown. This is the second time we're holding this event. It's an industry event. It's one of a kind, focused on bringing together industry analysts, marketing and analytics leaders, solution providers, agency heads, to really discuss cross-channel marketing in depth. It's focused on content. It's about a 1.5-day program, delivering thought leadership, insights, and strategies that will inspire you to move your marketing forward. We've assembled a great program of speakers, including, I've got a few listed here, Gadi Binmark, who's the head of social at McKinsey, Doug Neal, who runs up digital marketing for Universal Pictures, Ajit Sivadasan, who's head of global head of Lenovo.com, Tina Moffat, customer intelligence analyst from Forrester, will be joining us. So if you're interested and would like to find out more information and register, go to xcmo.com. And we'd love to see you in Austin and talk about marketing and enjoy some of the great things that Austin has to offer. So we'll see you there. So let's dive in. Really, as I talk to companies, large brands, agencies, kind of a consistent theme evolves through those conversations. We really talk about needing to be able to do 3 things to kind of move their business forward. First is to leverage available data. There's more and more data comes available. There's all kinds of stats about how fast the availability of data is growing. And really, marketers are under pressure to figure out new ways, innovative ways to leverage that data to ultimately drive better performance and better results. Similarly, the customer journey has become much more complex. It's now occurring not only across channels, but across devices, across channels. Consumers are using more and more channels, have access to more information, and are really taking a twisty-turny path through that journey to ultimately making a purchase decision. So marketers are really challenged to get the understanding of which marketing touch points, which channels are the ones that really ultimately impact and influence that ultimate conversion event. And then the last piece really is about becoming more omni-channel. Most companies I talk to are still organized, both in terms of strategy, physically, as well as their measurement, and are very channel-centric. So they want to be omni-channel in their approach, but organizationally they're still struggling to kind of stitch those pieces together and take a more holistic view. So one of the topics that comes up as they address these three pressures is the topic of attribution, the practice of determining the role each marketing touch plays in the customer journey that ultimately drives the business outcome. You know, it's companies are looking for ways to use this new data. They need to better understand the customer journey, and they need to move beyond kind of channel focus to a more of a cross-channel focus. So part of that attribution really is becoming a hot topic at most events, a lot of blog posts, a lot of articles. Attribution is now becoming top of mind. I think a couple years ago it was an interesting topic. It's transitioned now to we need to do something. Let's start thinking about what that means and how we're going to actually accomplish that. So I believe we're at that tipping point now where companies are really starting to take this on and seriously consider an initiative around attribution. One of the things I always talk about, and I think it's an important point, attribution is a drill bit. And as you think about an attribution project or initiative, you really have to think bigger than that. You know, attribution provides that currency of measurement that lets you understand performance, but people tend to think about it at the channel level. Paid search gets 32% of credit, affiliate gets 15%. And while that's important, there's really key aspects of attribution that are much more empowering. One is the granularity that you could possibly get to, where you start looking at how campaigns perform across channels, what's the lift and interplay between channels, how do I sequence and flight marketing across channels to drive greater results, and really on a full funnel basis, including impressions, converting, non-converting paths, what really is my performance in each aspect of that performance. So I think a lot of times when people talk about attribution, they're really thinking about percentages at the channel level, a fractional allocation of demand. The capabilities and the opportunity around attribution are actually much greater than that when you start looking across channels. So a lot of stats around last click. I read a lot of articles and blog posts that claim that last click is dead. The reality is it's actually the undead of marketing measurement. And you know, recently I read a study that said you know, somewhere between 45 and 65% are still using last click as their attribution method. And clearly, it's you know, it's been around a while. It's easy to do. It's built into most of the web analytics tools. Companies who are basing their performance on last click have systems and processes and previous year data that's built on a last click methodology. So change is hard, but it's still, last click is still fairly prevalent, along with other kind of more simple means. Recent report from Ignition One late last year said that 24% aren't doing attribution of any sort, which probably means they're double counting across the channels or optimizing performance based on activity metrics. 58% were using last click, and 18% are doing attribution and using something other than last click. So either a different type of rule set or some sort of advanced attribution using algorithmic or statistical methods. So I think we're starting to see the switch. Everybody agrees the last click is suboptimal. And like I said earlier, I think we're starting to see companies make that transition. Specifically, I've identified 4 areas where, you know, last click just doesn't cut it, and you really need to look to do something different. One is channel myopia. We're highly focused on optimizing performance at the channel level. You could almost make the statement, if you're optimized at the channel level, you're suboptimal across your channels. And so really breaking out of that, you know, last one to the bottom wins mentality, and how do we actually get a situation where 1 + 1 = 3. Inefficient marketing spend. There is lift, interplay, dependencies between channels and interactions. And without that view, you're probably not getting the performance out of your marketing that's actually available. And then ultimately, unrealized potential. What we see across our customers is by being more efficient, by spending their dollars in ways that actually drive better performance. It frees up money to do new or other things or invest in underinvested opportunities, which ultimately drives revenue and drives the business overall. So, kind of this last click view, or even to some degree a simple view like last ad click, is really limiting the potential of what marketing can do for a business. So what's keeping us from changing? As I talked to probably a couple hundred customers and companies over the last year, there's really 4 areas that always seem to come up in those conversations when we talk about, we're thinking about doing something, here's what we're concerned about. The first really is just reconciling all the data. They realize this is a data management project first and foremost, and that you really have to get your data house in order to support a robust attribution initiative. The second is just having the staffing necessary to do the analysis and perform kind of any work that needs to be done around attribution. It's not currently somebody's job to do this. Last click's kind of built into the existing systems. Nobody thinks about that other than it's flowing into kind of the financials and marketing performance reports. So I don't have the headcount to actually invest a couple people in actually really doing a deep dive on attribution and marketing performance. And then organizational challenges, consensus around what's the right methodology, what's the right rule. If we're changing the rules of the game, everybody has a stake in terms of ultimately what that outcome is going to look like. So have trouble getting consensus around that. And the organizational structure and the organizational mindset just kind of amplifies that challenge. If I own paid search, I may believe that I actually have something to lose moving from a last click model to a different model. The reality is what we see is the other channels help lift paid search and vice versa, and that overall, a rising tide floats all boats, and there's that real opportunity. But the organization, how it's structured, how it's incentivized, and kind of how it's managed, prohibits or creates barriers to people kind of shifting that mindset and moving forward. So that's what we kind of see in the marketplace and some of the challenges. Like I said, there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of momentum, and people are really starting to ask those hard questions now. How do I actually do this? What does it mean for my organization, and what are some of the things I should worry about? So what I'd like to do now is pass it over to Tim and let him basically go through his 10 tactics that addresses these specifically.
Okay, so we'll see how smoothly we can manage this transition.
Yep, you should have it, Tim.
I got it. And are we all set?
Yep.
All righty. Well, hello. Thanks, Casey, for the handoff. So my name is Tim Wilson, and I'm going to be talking through a lot of those, what Casey just hit on the last little section of what are the barriers. They're all barriers that can be overcome, but they have to be recognized as potential barriers up front. And it's not the specifics, the tactics, the wiring up of the advanced attribution management platform. There's some softer things that need to be considered during the implementation, throughout the implementation, and that's what I'm going to address today. So, as I said, my name is Tim Wilson. I'm a partner at Web Analytics Demystified. I've been in this space since about 2001, kind of started out in web analytics, dipped into BI and data warehousing, have done some data management work, have really stayed primarily in the digital world. So it's been a fun ride back in 2001 when we really were just looking to say, where did this traffic come from, to where we are today and the much richer and much more complex data sets that we're dealing with. I started out, spent the first 15 years of my career client side or in-house. I've also worked at a large creative agency, a digital agency, and am now doing consulting, working with a number of large brands. So, and helping them, understanding what their challenges are and helping them address those. So Web Analytics Demystified, very briefly, if you're not familiar with this, we are a end-to-end digital analytics services. So we're digital focused, digital being mobile and social and web. We do strategy work, help companies figure out what sort of people, process, technology they need to get in place to get the most value out of analytics. But we also help with implementation, and even ongoing analysis support and personnel development. So kind of stepping way back and talking about attribution management, what's it take to put it in place? Well, it takes the same thing it takes to do anything: people, process, and technology. If we specifically look at attribution management and just drill a little bit deeper into each one of those, technology, you think, well, clearly it's the actual platform itself. And that's definitely a core part of the technology, be it odometry or some other platform. But there's other technology, which is all of these different channels that you're operating in that have data, and that data needs to be collected. So they need to be tweaked and tuned. So there's sort of two dimensions of technology that have to be factored in and need to be planned for and recognized. On the people front, you've definitely got the implementation team. You've got a project manager, maybe a business analyst, a project sponsor, the core developers who are helping get everything wired up and working. But you've also got the stakeholders, the people who are ultimately going to be using the information that comes out of the system to drive decisions and take action. And I'm going to talk a lot today about the need to really treat those channel owners as extended members of the implementation team. Not with just a periodic email update, but really having them embedded in the implementation. And I'll talk about why that's important. And then finally, there's process. Well, you have your process for deploying a platform, so there's the implementation. And beyond just attribution management, we've all, I think, experienced the classic, we get so hung up on getting the technology wired up that we forget about the fact that we need to have a process for actually using the platform, the new platform. And that should be part of the implementation as well, thinking through, once this hits and it rolls out, do we have a well-established process that's going to perform well to actually get value out of the program? So I've kind of breaking this down into three really broad buckets. The first of which is managing expectations and educating stakeholders. And I've got a handful of tactics specifically within this area. And the key here is that this is a gradual process. You can't manage expectations and educate stakeholders with a single email or a single presentation. So there are a number of different tactics. You want to kind of come at it from different angles to make sure that everybody's on the same page and they understand what advanced attribution management actually is. So the first tactic is gaining alignment on what success looks like. At a very, very high level, and Casey touched on this as well, it's not that hard to explain the problem. When people say last click attribution is dead, that's because they feel like it's dead because everybody knows there's problems with last click attribution. And everybody knows that if they use a more data-driven attribution program, that things will be better. But when the rubber really hits the road, and how are we measuring if this program is successful, it's not as easy as just saying, well, it's just, what's the ROI of the program? That sounds great, but it's not necessarily quite that straightforward. So the way that I work with clients when it comes to the outset of a program like this is I ask what I call the two magic questions. And the goal was to say, we're not starting with what are the KPIs for the key performance indicators for the program. We're starting at a little bit higher level and just asking, what are we trying to achieve? And when it comes to, you'd think that it's kind of simple. Well, you're doing attribution management. How many things could you be trying to achieve? Well, you might be saying we've really got to stop internal debate and disagreement. There's too much churn internally about which channels are contributing what to our results. That's probably not your only thing you're trying to achieve. You're also trying to achieve greater results from your marketing investment. But actually articulating really clearly, and if there are metrics that come out in this, that's fine. But if answering this first question, it stays more clearly articulated, but not necessarily a data answer, that's not the point of this question. It is saying, are we all on the same page in one or two or three sentences as to what we're expecting this program to do? And you want to involve your platform provider in that discussion as well, to make sure they say, yeah, that is what our platform will help you do. Once you've answered that question, then you ask the question that really is the rubber hitting the road. How will we know if we've achieved that? So if one of the things you're trying to achieve is, say, we want to have greater confidence that the investments we're making are in the right spot with our marketing. Well, maybe one of the ways that you'll need to measure that is you need to ask people, do you have greater confidence in the decisions that you're making? You need to do an internal survey before and after, and maybe every couple of months going forward. You absolutely need to have financial measures as part of the how we know if we've done that. It can't all just be kind of softer attitudinal measures. But it's important to kind of define and establish up front, because having this discussion, it's not just going to give you measurements of success, it will actually also help get alignment by engaging stakeholders in the discussion about what success, how success is defined. Now there's a second measurement tactic, which is gaining alignment on what your primary attribution metrics are. When you're working in silos, paid search may be looking at cost per click, and that's kind of what they're reporting. And maybe your display team is really using return on ad spend. And maybe the email team is using revenue. They're saying our costs are so low that we're just going to report results on overall revenue. Well, if you're trying to do data-driven attribution management, you have to have a common language for what you're actually attributing towards. So one way to approach that is to start, and this has a sort of dual purpose, but part of it is getting buy-in, starting the discussion with each of the channels, going to your paid search team and saying, am I really clear on who owns it? What metric does paid search use when they are reporting their performance? And often the same metric is used when they're doing optimization. What is that metric? Where's that data coming from? And how's it actually being reported? How is it being calculated? Getting that all captured across all the channels that are going to be included in the first phase or couple of phases of the rollout of the program, it starts the conversation. It sort of forces some real clarity of getting everything documented in a centralized place. And then you have to do kind of the hard part, looking at that list and saying, we can't have a different metric for every channel. So how do we then consolidate that list? And now shop that around, go back to the stakeholders. They need to understand that they'll have to change maybe what their success metric is. But what you're trying to head off is, at the end of the day, you roll out your first report results from the program, and you say, this is kind of what we're seeing. And if somebody, the paid search says, well, that's not the metric we use, you've kind of dug yourself a hole at that point. So this is getting alignment, that everybody's on the same page of, with this program, we're using the most appropriate attribution metric that will work across those channels. The next part of kind of alignment is really ensuring that the methodology is well understood by the stakeholders. Because if it's just a magical black box, if something comes out of that magical black box of the data-driven attribution management program and they don't like what they see, if they don't understand it, then they're going to kind of react with sort of a fight or flight, and you're setting up an adversarial position. If you can help them understand early on in a non-threatening way, this is how this works, then you'll be setting up for when the results roll out that they'll have buy-in, they'll accept what the results are. So does that mean you need to bring in your platform providers, data scientists, and sit everybody down for 4 hours and teach them all of the math of data-driven attribution? No, that'll put them to sleep and they're not really going to retain it. But you do need to figure out a way to very concisely visualize what that methodology is. We know who our coworkers are who are really good at taking something that's kind of complicated and sort of simplifying it, but still conveying the key points. So this is definitely a for instance, where on a single, not super simple, somebody may still have to walk through this. You may say, look, we're collecting data from these different sources. We then have to process that data. Maybe explaining that if you just look at if we've tracked that somebody interacted with A and then B and then C and then converted, and then we take the group of people who just interacted with A and then C and then converted, if we compare those results, the difference in them is the contribution of B in that situation. So this is a super simplistic view, but getting a way to clearly capture this, again, working with your platform provider, finding the internal resources, making sure you've got something that that fits on one or two simple slides, diagrams, that the entire team understands, can talk to in the same way, and that they do. Every opportunity they have, when they can pull that out, when they're talking to somebody, they can socialize it so people can ask questions and wrap their heads around it. So related to that is ensuring an understanding of the realities of the data capture. There is a lot of data. It's out there. Everybody knows that there is a ton of data, but it's not really okay to just say, this program is going to make sense of all that data, because it's not going to make sense of all of the data on day one. So here I like to use a diagram of some form again. Say, look, ultimately at the end of the day, we care about conversions or money. We have our primary attribution metric, but be very transparent, laying out that up front, these are the channels that we're including. And maybe your initial run at it, you're only going to focus on online conversions. And clearly show that. This is what we're going to include in phase one. We know what we're planning to put into phase two. And maybe in phase two, that's when we're going to bring in offline conversions. And we know there's other stuff that we want to add. Some of it is just not practical that we'll ever be able to get visibility or capture it. Some of it we haven't put a whole lot of effort into because maybe we're not investing a whole lot in that area, or it's going to be super complicated to try to feed the data in. But having the transparency so that what you're trying to head off here is, if you roll out with a limited set of channels, which you almost certainly will, you won't be able to do everything at once, or you'll have a very extended implementation, is you're heading off somebody saying, well, wait a minute, this model, this all looks great, but you totally ignored TV. So therefore everything is invalid. So having that transparency up front, inviting questions, inviting discussion, and being clear on what the plan is for the rollout. So that's all about initial engaging and ongoing education and understanding and awareness across as broad a group as possible. The next kind of group of tactics is around the technical implementation. This isn't the specifics of wiring up an attribution management platform, but again, it's a little bit about the softer side and the consideration of tactics to keep from hitting the point where you're a week out from launch and all of a sudden you hit a major showstopper that's going to take 2 months to address. That almost never has to happen if you kind of plan for it up front. First thing is bringing in IT well before the contract is signed. There's so much software as a service out there now, and in many cases, and I haven't seen it as much with attribution management, where you'll actually have someone saying you don't need IT involved, but it's still pretty common to hear, and this isn't just platform providers or salespeople, this includes internal staff, maybe the project sponsors in marketing, and has a contentious relationship with IT. So, if you hear things like, we don't want to bring in IT because they're just going to slow us down, or if somebody who's not in IT says, don't worry, this is going to be an easy switch for IT to make. When you hear those things, don't let those continue. Ignore them. Absolutely need to bring in IT as early as possible and make sure that they're brought in, they're included. You're asking them, what are the pitfalls we might hit? What might be the challenges? Who else do we need to talk to? The IT organization understands how bits and bytes fly around the internet in general better than marketers do. And they also understand the nuances and the unique aspects of your company's platforms and services. So bringing them in, leveraging their expertise, making sure they are core to the team and they are always being included is critical. So related to that, there's a little bit of a misperception sometimes where there people in the organization will say, we're already collecting all of this data. Our ad server is giving us display media impressions and clicks. Our web analytics platform is telling us, which organic search traffic to the site. Our bid management platform is giving us paid search data. So that sounds good, but the fact is, those are all set up to provide data in a silo. Now, sometimes your web analytics platform may be getting data feeds from some other places, so there's some level of cross-channel supplemental data. But as you start to go through the implementation and list out the channels and do an audit, and most most platform providers, this is going to be part of their process. Let's list out the channels, what's being used to capture the data, what data are we capturing, and then in many cases, the data is being captured, but it needs to be tweaked a little bit so that that data can be integrated and joined across data sources. So the display and email, if the same person opens an email and is exposed to a display ad, there is a way with the attribution management platform, it gets enough data to make the link across them. So kind of head that off. Make people ensure that people aren't thinking that we're already capturing this data. This is all stuff that's just happening on the back end. You likely will need to work with some of those external data collection sources and have them make adjustments. So then the third area is actually ensuring that results lead to action. So this is where I'm start to talk about it's not enough to just have everything wired up. We need to make sure that when it launches, we're prepared as an organization to take action on what we're learning. And a super key, so this is very similar to the early tactics of gaining alignment on what success looks like, but it really means having in the plan that you're engaging your channel owners very early and very often. It is a scheduled thing to include the paid search owner, the display owner, the email program owner, the site owner in the discussions. And we'll talk a little bit about the different ways, in addition to getting their alignment on success, in addition to aligning with them on what the best primary attribution metrics are, you need to use them for some use their expertise. There are kind of multiple benefits, but this is so important. I kind of want to pause a little bit and say why it is so important to even the difficult channel owners, even the ones that aren't receptive, the ones that accept the meeting but then don't show up for it. You need to track them down. You need to make sure you're having a dialogue with them. You're asking for their input. You're asking for their concerns, because the better that you can address those and you can hear them and you can respond to them, the more buy-in you'll get for the program, which will pays enormous dividends after the launch, because you've got them as partners with you rather than somebody that you're trying to throw information over the wall and hoping they do something with it. Another aspect is repetition. As Casey spoke to, and as you already know, attribution is complicated. It's easy to say last click is bad and we need to do more truly data-driven attribution management, but it's not going to be let's have a half-hour presentation and everyone will sort of understand the ins and outs. They're kind of subtle things. What's the difference between attribution management and media mix modeling? What is this program really going to do? How does it work? And some level of repetition, so that in kind of bite-sized chunks, we're repeating the information so that it's really getting kind of embedded in the long-term memory of the channel owners so they actually understand it. They understand it 2 or 3 days after you've last talked to them. It's not that they understand it for 5 minutes after you had a conversation. And then the third area is really important. Don't undercount the value of their knowledge. They know where they've run into hiccups in the past with the data they're using and the way they're using it right now. They understand more deeply probably than you do how a specific channel is being used, where it's delivering value, how it works. So they actually will be helping you identify, risks that you can mitigate with a longer lead time than, you've fallen into the pit. And that's when you find out that, oh yeah, here's this risk. You want to identify it and head it off. So part of that involvement is collaborating with really establishing the process with which the results of the program are going to be used to take action. And this isn't sit in a room, write out a flow chart, and then present it and say, here's our process for taking action. I've seen that many, many times over my career. Somebody dreams up a process that looks fine on paper, but is completely impractical in reality. So it gets rolled out and everybody just ignores it. So here, using scenario planning, which is kind of a classic, planning process development approach. But when it comes to attribution management, working with your platform provider, saying, let's pretend, what are some possible or likely results? Dummy data, but if I can get it in a format that's going to match how ultimately I expect to be delivering results, let me get the channel owners in a room and say, I need your input. I need your help. I want to make sure that what we're setting up is something that ultimately will lead to action and business value. So let's look at this scenario. If this were the results that we saw, let's all agree on what action should be taken. Is the information there that would tell us what action we need to take? And who's sitting in this room would actually be taking that action? And then let's turn to that person and say, what would you need to do to act? Would you need additional information? Would you need support? Would there be timing constraints? When? How quickly would you be able to act? And run that through with multiple scenarios across ideally multiple meetings, not half-day meetings. These are, kind of 1 hour discussions, and get in a groove with this group. Make sure they're starting to interact with each other just as you're getting the data to not be siloed. You're trying to get, you're helping that group become a cohesive group that looks at a more holistic view of how marketing is playing out. And that means that when the first real results do get presented, they've already kind of gone through that process. They've practiced it, and they're ready to go. And it will be a familiar process rather than something totally new and foreign when you actually have results. So then, another key thing to take in mind is committing to ongoing maintenance of the program. So this is not a one and done. We've rolled this program out and then it's finished. Things change. Paid search vendors change. The DSPs we're using will change. New channels will crop up that didn't exist. They don't exist now, and they do exist a year from now and are critical. So we have to make sure that the program is still, the platform is still getting good quality and complete data. So one part of that part of the maintenance is establishing data governance for the program. The data has to be complete. It has to be well documented. And here's a really simplistic process for that. Early on, ask yourself, do you already have a data governance function? Do you have data stewards? Is there a group in IT? Are there people who are identified as a virtual team that kind of are stewards of the data for the organization? And if the answer is yes, then pull them in and say, how do I fit within your processes for making sure we've documented and are tracking and have the processes in place to do appropriate data governance for our data-driven attribution management? If you don't, do you ignore it because you say, hey, the company doesn't have data governance and must not be needed? No, you're going to have to do a little bit more work. You have to do a little bit of research on what are the ins and outs of data governance. But some of the key ones are the platform, the program is relying on data from other sources. Capturing those sources, defining what that data means, identifying what the key processes are that are generating that data, as well as getting that data into your platform, and figuring out what's the process for monitoring data quality. Where can alerts be set up? How can we make sure that if something does change and it breaks the feed of data, that we know as quickly as possible and can address it? And then finally, this is maintaining the program from a internal marketing and evangelization perspective. And we like to do this with what I call a regular program results readouts, because until the idea and the concept and the realities of data-driven attribution are really embedded in the organization, there needs to be some level of marketing and education and ongoing reminders as to what the program is, how it works, and why it's so critical to really make as a key part of the marketing operation. So doing this readout, and this, whether it's monthly, whether it's every 6 weeks, ideally it's not every quarter, because that's almost too slow. But it will vary by the organization. The structure that I like to use is always leading with those success measures. So the very first tactic we talked about is having clearly defined success measures. So this is one page, one screen that is very objective, and it is, these were the measures we established, and this is how we're performing against those. And it's okay if they're not all totally hitting, they're not all green. It's transparency, it's building trust, and it's really saying, are we delivering what we set out to achieve? Then another pretty tight display, what were the actions? Not what were the results that were presented, what were the actions that were identified that could be taken based on the results coming out of the program? What was the full list of actions that could have been taken based on those results? And that's, again, a summary, like a summary view. Then for the actions that were taken, drilling just a little bit deeper on one slide, saying this was what we saw in the results that led to us taking this action. This is when we took the action, and if possible, if it's available, this was the impact. We could quantify this. And then, when applicable, you're probably for the first good period of time, you're going to be expanding and enhancing the program. So reminding people that, hey, we're not done with this. We're still making it better. Next month is when we're going to be rolling out the tie-in to the offline conversions or the input from the call center. And so reminding them that, hey, we're still working on this, and allowing for questions. The key here is this is succinct, it's concise, it's clear, and it needs to pass the so what test. So put some real care into this. This is something where you want people to say, I understand what this is, it clearly matters, and it's got a program that's got a lot of validity. It's being well run, and I see how it is driving us to think a different way and make better decisions. So with that, everything I've just gone through, these 10 tactics are part of a white paper, and you can actually download that white paper. It's got a little bit more detail, and that's at www.odometry.com/10_tactics_white paper. So with that, I think you're right about on the planned time. We will,
Great, thanks, Tim.
turn over to take questions.
Yeah, great, thanks. Just a reminder, everyone, within the next day or two, we'll send out an email with links to the replay, the slides, and the white paper as well. We've got a couple minutes here, so we do have a couple questions that we'll go ahead and drill into. First one probably best for you to take it, Tim. Of the 10 tactics that you highlighted, which area do you typically see for your clients, kind of struggling in executing that aspect of a program?
So that's a good. It's kind of a tough question to private. It's like asking which one of my kids is my favorite. But I think I'm going to cheat a little bit and say what it's more of a theme that runs through a number of these tactics, more explicitly in some than others. But it really is that my clients get so focused on the tactical wiring up of the platform that they don't take the time to do the kind of change management and the getting buy-in and the engaging the stakeholders and asking for input and making sure as many people as possible are comfortable that their questions are answered. So it's kind of an overemphasis on the technology and a gross underemphasis on the people and the process that technology is going to support. And when that's missed, you wind up post launch with some setbacks that are much harder. That you're in holes of organizational change that are much harder to dig out of than those holes didn't need to exist in the first place.
Great. Yeah, totally agree. We see that as well. Next question is around, you had a slide, I think it said modifying existing data sets. The question is, we have all the data we need, so you know, is there any kind of blind spots that we should be worried about as we go into this?
So yeah, I'm hoping that question maybe came in the midst of me answering it, because I think that was really that's the misperception that I do see a lot, because each one of those existing data sets was sort of established in a silo. And if you think about it, data-driven attribution management is really about the entire ecosystem. So it's kind of like you could tweak your site analytics platform to push some data into your email platform, but rather than kind of just thinking about it one case at a time, where I need system A's data to interact with system B's data, when you're rolling out a program like this, you need to have that more holistic view and say each of our data sources is going to be included in this, has to be integratable and connectable at the user level across all platforms. And that really does require some element of tweaking to enable that stitching together.
Yeah, I think the thing I would add to that, we see this a lot across a lot of our customers, is just creating consistent practices, taxonomies, and approaches to campaign definitions, creative IDs, consistent around conversion events, ad events, et cetera, just across all those channels, really opening up the hood and basically looking at it with that cross-channel view and creating that consistency. The last question, and then we'll let everybody get to watching NCAA basketball games. There's really a question around the resources required, project management, et cetera, for an initiative like this.
So, and I'll definitely probably have you chime in as well. In my experience, there's the thing we try to head off is thinking that recognizing this is a program, not a project. And so if it flows through, if you have a PMO, a project management office, or a program management office, that it does need to be treated as this is a real thing with real substance. And especially during the initial implementation, this can't just be kind of tacked on as to resources who already have overfull plates and say, oh, maybe you spend a couple of weeks helping get this rolling as well. There needs to be a core team that is identified, internally, and what projects are they rolling off of, so that you can have a program manager or a project manager who really has the time to lay out all the moving parts and make sure that things are happening. So that's for the implementation. When it comes to the ongoing running of the program, once the implementation is down to we're just adding one new channel or one new conversion point, it's a much lower burden on the team, but there still needs to be a defined team, likely a virtual team, but with accountability, with responsibility. This will drive some efficiency, because there's less of a need to try to be piecing together any sort of cross-channel stuff. It's putting in a more efficient process for getting a cross-channel, cross-platform view, but there does need to be a team defined. What is the attribution management team? Who sits on it? Are all the areas appropriately represented? And is it being managed with a regular cadence? But I don't know, Casey, if you have some thoughts there as well.
No, I think you're right on. I think the only thing I would add is usually this is a cross-functional initiative, you have to have a very strong executive sponsor to kind of help champion it, help manage the change associated with it, and making sure that there's sufficient buy-in and available resources across each of the stakeholder groups. Uh, Two more questions here, Tim, and then we'll wrap it up. What questions should be asked to determine kind of our readiness for an attribution initiative? What are your thoughts on that?
So that's a yeah. There is a maturity element to this. If no one's looking at the data right now, and this is where I think last click, it's a transition point. If you already have multiple channels that are really digging into last click, and they are struggling with the fact that they have got all the data they have a view to, and they are coming up and saying, we know that this is likely misrepresenting something. We have an absolute pain. So I think that's one. Like it's an indicator. It's hard to go from we're not doing any decent or meaningful measurement, and we're going to dive full into full on attribution. Chances are that's a huge leap, because now you're not talking about tweaking data. You're talking about looking into channels that you're kind of ignoring, not measuring or analyzing as it is. The second, which has now completely escaped me, but it was a
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, I totally agree. I think a couple other questions or things to think about is, you know, where are the easy wins, where channels matter, where do you think the biggest opportunities are, and kind of getting your head wrapped around those is using those to help build your business case for attribution. We talked a lot about organizational readiness and preparing the organization and the stakeholders for the change associated with it. So I mean, there's probably some questions around just, as an organization, can we succeed at this kind of change, and is it strategically important?
It came to me. The question, which I don't think I've touched on, I didn't really touch on here, but if there is a recognition that, or if there is a big question about what does the customer journey really look like, if you're making the pivot to customer centricity, and there's a lot of things moving where you realize instead of being channel centric, you really are being customer centric, and you're saying we don't really know what the purchase life cycle is. If you're asking those sorts of questions, then attribution management is you're likely ready for that, because it is pivot. It is a great enabler on getting you to a much more customer centric view to then drive and understand your channels.
Yeah, great point. So it's 5 till the hour, so I think we should go ahead and wrap it up. I apologize, everybody. We overran a little bit. Great questions. Tim, thank you for participating. Great information. Really appreciate it. Once again, everybody, you will have an email in your inbox that will point to the replays and slides and white paper. So take a look at that. If you have specific questions for Tim or I, feel free to reach out to us. I know either Twitter or LinkedIn. Always love to engage with everybody and kind of have further and deeper conversations. And then the last piece, would love to see you all in Austin the first week of May at XCMO Summit. So thanks again for attending, and we'll talk soon.